By my count, I am the fourth preacher you have had in 4 weeks. I don't know if that makes it harder for you or harder for me. Does anyone else feel like they've got just a little bit of whiplash? But I've got to let you know, I am excited and thrilled to be here. My name is Ken Schafer. I am the stewardship minister for Brentwood Baptist Church. And my very first day on the job was August 1st of 2021. And you know what I did on that day? It was a Sunday. My family and I went to West Franklin, the church at West Franklin, where we'd been members for some time. And when that service was over, I came over here. And my very first day on the job as an employee and a minister of Brentwood Baptist Church, I was with this congregation. And I am a big fan of what you do here. I've been in many of your services over the last 2 years. I've gotten to know, love, and appreciate your staff. They are phenomenal. And I consider it to be a privilege to be with you today. But here's what I realized as I was preparing for this message. I feel like I know you, and I've met many of you, but most of you I don't know, so I'm going to stand up here on the stage. You don't really know me at all, so I want to help you get to know me a little bit by telling you a little bit about my family. My wife is with me today. My 2 children are here. Actually, I've got a brother-in-law in from Maryland. They're here for a little family get-together, and my father-in-law is here as well, so you can say hi to them. That's the people you don't recognize up here when we're leaving. I grew up in Florida. My mother and father have been married almost 60 years. I have 2 sisters. One's a year younger than I am, and one's 15 years younger. So in most of the time that I was growing up, it was my mother, my father, my sister, and me. And I grew up in what I would consider to be, or some would describe as a very strict household. Or maybe we'll go with ordered or well-disciplined with a lot of expectation. Can I get an amen? All right, so that's a little bit about me, but let's figure out about you. How many of you, I'm going to put this on a scale of 1 to 10. If 10 in the household you grew up in, your parents actually met when they were both drill sergeants in the Marines, that's a 10. And over here is the 1. And if you're a 1, you grew up in the 60s and rules just weren't a thing, all right? So how many of you are a 5 or lower? Rules were not a thing. We've got a handful of those. So the rest of you, you're a 6 or higher, right? Put your hands up. Put your hands up. All right. Some of you are saying, does the scale only go to 10? Is there a 12? Is there a 13? We were one of those households that had a lot of order. And I'm going to tell you, if you were a 5 or lower, I'm going to tell you what that looked like in our house growing up. In my house, most days there were 3 meals. We had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And when we had a meal and sat down at the table, the children, that would be my sister and me, we were expected to eat everything that was on the plate. Now, I know that in some households, the rule is the kid just has to try it, and if he doesn't have to like it, he doesn't have to finish it. That was not how we played in the Schafer household. If it was on the plate, you ate it, even if you thought that was just to make you miserable. My parents would always say this thing, hey, Ken, this is for your own good, right? You had the same household. Okay, so then after the meal was over, we would have to go, no matter what we wanted to do, we had to go to the bathroom, and we had to brush our teeth. I'm like, do we have to brush our teeth 3 times a day? This is just miserable. And my parents would say, yes, you have to brush your teeth. It's for, you guys are quick, all right? And in my town growing up, maybe in your town, we had school. And every time that the school was open, we had to go. I mean, that was the expectation. That's how strict we were in our house, right? So we had to go to school now, did we feel like going to school all the time? The answer to that question is no. My parents would say, it's for your own good. When we got home from school as I got older, there would be homework, and I mean, we might rather play outside or read a book or watch television, play a video game, although those were pretty new when I was a kid. And my parents would say, no, you have to do your homework. It's for your own good. About 2nd grade, they got this idea that we needed to start taking music lessons. So we would go and by we, I mean my parents, would pay a music instructor, and the lesson was kind of fun. But then after the lesson was over, we needed to practice for our own good. I'm guessing that maybe even if you're a 5 or lower household, you had something like that. And even if your parents weren't that way, at some point in the course of your life, you have had someone who insisted that you do something that you didn't want to do, and you thought it was just to make you miserable, but it was for your own good. Maybe you played football in high school or in college, and playing football is fun, but what do you have to do to play football? You've got to practice when it's hot. You've got to go to the weight room, and the coach says, this is for your own good. Right now, I'm watching my daughter. She plays on the basketball team at her school, and I'll go to the end of a practice. They're running a drill called suicides. If you run a suicide, there's nothing that looks fun about that. It looks completely miserable. The coach isn't trying to make them miserable. He's doing it for their own good. And isn't it true that much of the time, the things that we don't like doing, these are the things that are for our good? And I think God works that way with us. Just a few minutes ago, Johnny talked about how God put Adam and Eve in the garden. He said, this is yours. I want you to take care of it. And he gave them one rule. You can eat all the fruit, but just not this one. And that rule was for their good. They didn't believe God. It did not go well for them. And as a result, it hasn't gone well for us. Fast forward many years, God is setting up a new society with the children of Israel. And they don't have any rules, they don't have any laws, they don't have any regulations, what's good and what's bad. And he gives them the 10 Commandments, right? And he says, hey, don't lie. Can I ask you a question? How many of you have ever lied? Put your hand up. If you didn't put your hand up, you just joined our party. When you lied, did it work out well? It never did. As easy as it might seem to lie, and as much as you think you might be able to get away with a lesser relational consequence when God gives us that command not to lie, it is for our good. And today, what we're going to do is we are going to look at one very specific passage in Scripture with a very specific command that is for our good. And I've got to warn you in advance that I'm the stewardship minister. And at the end of this message, I'm going to ask you to give. I don't think you're going to hate it when we get there. And before we get there, I'm actually going to give you chocolate chip cookies. And now that you're intrigued, let's take a look at 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 to 19. It's going to be on the screen. I'm going to ask you to stand as we read this together. And Paul writes to Timothy, he says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasures for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. You can sit down. Many of Paul's letters are to churches and groups of believers. We have Corinthians, Romans, Colossians, Galatians, Ephesians. Timothy is a letter that's written by Paul to his pastoral protege. His name is Timothy. He's the pastor at a church at Ephesus. And what Paul is telling Timothy is what he needs to do to be a good pastor. And so if you are a pastor or minister of the gospel, which is the role that I serve at Brentwood Baptist Church, I am intensely interested in what it is that Paul tells Timothy he should do, because I want to do my best to be a good pastor and a good minister and a good spiritual leader of people. And what Paul tells Timothy to do is not subtle by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, if you look in verse 18, Paul basically says, Timothy, I want you to tell your people to do just a handful of things. And in my translation, it says, I want you to command them. In many translations, the one we have on the screen actually says instruct. I want you to tell the Christians in your church, I want you to tell them to do good works. I want you to tell them to be rich in good deeds. And I want you to tell them, to be generous. I want you to tell them to give financially. I want you to tell them, I want you to command them, I want you to instruct them to be willing to share. I want to point out just a couple words in this text. The first is the word command or instruct. A lot of times in church, when we think about asking or inviting people to give, we use words like ask or invite. And we think if we tell a very inspiring story and we might play soft music and give you good pictures, like that will inspire you to give, and it might. But that's not what Paul tells Timothy to do. Paul says to Timothy, I want you to command people who are rich to give. I want you to command them to be generous. And there's a fair number of you in this room right now that are saying, oh my goodness, I am so glad that he only gave that instruction to rich people. And you're looking around at all the rich people in the room, and you're thinking, I hope that guy is paying attention because I can check out of this sermon. This is a command from which I am exempt because I am not rich. I have good news for you and I have bad news for you. Here's the good news. The good news is you're rich. The bad news is you just may not know it. And here's what I mean. Throughout most of recorded human history, mankind has struggled just to eat and just to survive. We were dependent on weather, we were dependent on crops, we were subjected to famine, to natural disaster. And if you had more than you needed for today, if you had enough for today and tomorrow, that gave you just enough margin that you started to be wealthy. You started to be rich. In fact, one way to think of being rich is just to have more than enough. I'm guessing that everyone in this room, while we come from different economic backgrounds and we have different capacity, if you have a refrigerator in your home, by definition, you have more than enough, because a refrigerator is designed to store food for future consumption. By historical standards, you're rich. In fact, even by global standards, there's someone somewhere in the world today who would trade places with the poorest person in this room because of what you have, whether it's money, because of what you have, whether it's opportunity or education, electricity. By global and historical standards, we are all rich. Now, am I naive enough to say that all of us feel rich? I am not. Am I naive enough to say that there's not tremendous economic disparity in our country? I am not that foolish. But what I do know is that other parts of the world, there are people that starve to death. And while there's some food insecurity in the United States, and I'm not minimizing that if that's you, but compared to the long arc of history in the United States and at the church at Woodbine, we are blessed beyond our ability to even comprehend. So by way of framing this up, Paul is telling Timothy how to be a good pastor. He says, if you want to be a good pastor, you need to command people to be generous. And he's talking specifically about rich people, and that's all of us. Have we got it? We understand that? Good. And so I'm going to let you know, then when we talk about giving and when we talk about money in church, it gets really weird really fast. Anybody feeling that right now? I mean, I met two people here this morning that are here for the first time, and they're like, I knew it. I'm coming to church. I'm coming to church. And the guy already said we already had an offering. He's going to ask us to give again. I get that tension. I'm the stewardship minister. I get that all the time. I mean, you think it's weird for you? People introduce me as the stewardship minister. Men actually do this and kind of put their hand on their wallet. Women grab their purse like this. And I tell you what, there is somebody here right now, maybe more than one, when I said, hey, I'm going to ask you to give, that person said, I have already made up my mind. No matter what that preacher man says, no matter how good he is or what, I am just not giving. All the church wants is my money, right? That's what we say. So let's acknowledge that talking about giving in church, that can be weird, it can be uncomfortable. And I'm going to try not to do that today. There is a lot of scripture and a lot of theology all around giving. We could talk about Old Testament sacrifice. We could talk about tithing. We could talk about stewardship. We could talk about offering and giving over and above. And you know what all those things have in common? They're not in this passage, so we're not going to do it. And aren't you lucky? This is a sermon. This is a sermon on giving, not a summit on stewardship. You should just you came on the right day. In fact, there's really one big takeaway from this passage. I'm going to give it to you now because I believe in very, very simple teaching. This is it. When Paul tells Timothy to command people to give, it is for their good. Giving, according to this passage, is for our good. In fact, if you look in this passage, you can look all through it many, many times, and what you will not find is what we're told to give to. Now, that's elsewhere in Scripture. We can unpack that at some other time. But giving is so important at our church. I want you to understand this single spiritual truth. Giving is good for us. Giving is for our good. Some of you are nodding and some of you aren't convinced. And the reason you're not convinced is because a lot of time when we talk about giving in church, this is what we do. Actually, we did this last week. I was here. I was sitting right over there. And how many of you here last week you met your missionary, Sam? I'd only ever met, he came up, right? We kind of interviewed him on stage. I'd only ever met Sam by Zoom, so it was kind of fun to meet him. I enjoyed meeting Sam. He's tall. He's way taller in person than he is on Zoom. And we bring people up and we talk about it in the offering. We say, hey, part of your giving goes to this person, to our missionary work overseas. Because you give, we're able to do this. And I already told you that I love your staff. I think they're great. I enjoy spending time with all the people that serve you. And you know what? Those people have to give, and we aren't quite sure how it works out. But somehow, when we give, like our staff gets paid and they can eat, and that's important. And I noticed that the season's changing. We finally have just a little bit of cold, and so we want the heat on in here, and we know that when we give, like all of a sudden we've got to turn the heat on, and we have money to do that. And so a lot of times in church when we talk about giving, we talk about what we're giving to. And the phrase we use all the time, and it's a good phrase, it's just not complete, this is the phrase we use, because you give. So when I tell you that giving is for your good, you say to me, well, Ken, that isn't how we normally talk about giving. And you're right, and that's okay. Giving is a big topic. But if we're honest, a lot of our hesitation around this topic has to do with not what we're giving to. It's the very simple idea that when I give something, I don't have it. Isn't that right? When I give something away, it's no longer mine. And if giving is for our good, I got to be honest, if I have less because I gave it away, it doesn't feel like it's good for me, does it? If I have $100 and I give it to you, it feels like it's good for you, but it doesn't feel like it's good for me. And so I'm going to suggest to you that when we talk about giving and when you have a problem, a lot of times our problem is not with giving. A lot of times our problem is with simply not having. And recognizing that, the Apostle Paul helps us understand a little bit about the nature of money, and he does that in verse 17. And I want to go through this just a couple of words at a time to help us think about money and what money does. It's the spiritual nature and its impact on us. So look back at verse 17. Paul gives us this idea. He says, command those who are rich. We covered that. Not to be arrogant. How many of us have known rich people that are arrogant? Okay, everybody. You're nodding or putting up your hand. How many of us have ever had that fantasy where we win the lottery and the first thing, because we're church people, is we're like, well, I would definitely tithe, and there's these things I want to do, and I would buy a house for my hairdresser, and that would be great. It would be great to have that amount of money to give away. But somewhere in the back of our mind is this idea, if I had more money, that boss I used to have that I didn't like, I could go buy that company, and I could fire that guy. Is that just me? I don't think so. I think that might be just a guilty pleasure that's tucked away in the back of our mind somewhere, because we believe that the more money we have, the more choices we're given. And there's a sense in which that's true, but Paul says, hey, money has the possibility of making you arrogant. Timothy, I want you to command your people that their wealth should not make them arrogant. And then the next thing he helps us understand is that money lies to us. Do we know that money lies to us? We believe things about money that aren't true. We believe money can bring us security. We believe it can bring us safety. We believe it can bring us satisfaction. We believe that it can bring us status. In reality, what Paul says is wealth, when we hope in wealth, the wealth is uncertain. If we are trusting in money for things that only God can do, we are making a mistake, and we will always be disappointed. And Paul goes on to say, command your people to trust in God, and this might be one of my favorite verses in all Scripture. For anyone that wrestles with what money is and what it can do, we've just seen that it can make us arrogant. We've seen that it's uncertain. And then Paul says this very surprising thing. He says, hope in God, because God richly provides us with all things to enjoy. Well, what's the thing he provides us with? Money. So even though money can make us arrogant, even though we can't really trust in it, if we have some, Paul is telling us it's okay to enjoy it. God has given us money to enjoy, and it's against that backdrop of a rich theology around what money can and can't do that we are given the command, not the suggestion, but we are given the command to be generous. And why is that? Because when we are generous with our money, it makes us less arrogant. And because when we are generous with our money, when we give some away, when we have less, it breaks our tendency to trust the money that we have. And honestly, if you've ever had the pleasure of giving money away to someone that needs it, whoever it is there anything you can do with money that's more enjoyable than that? I don't think so. And so giving is for our good. It changes the nature of our relationship with money. And if that weren't enough, Paul goes on to tell us in verse 19, he says, if you're generous, if you're doing good deeds, if you're rich towards the world, if you are living with an open hand, you're going to lay up treasure for yourself as a firm foundation for the coming age. As good as your life will be now, Paul goes on to say, in the coming age, you will take hold of the best life, the life that is truly life. Not only does our generosity affect us in this world in ways that we can't even understand, it will affect us into eternity. And it's for those reasons that Paul was confident in his instruction to Timothy to command rich people to be generous. I promised you chocolate chip cookies. So, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask the ushers. You know how the ushers normally collect an offering? Today we are going to distribute a gift of chocolate chip cookies. And we need to do it quickly. We got them there in the back. I have chocolate chip cookies for everybody. I want to tell you about the chocolate chip cookies. Yesterday, I went with my son to go buy the chocolate chip cookies. I love the Church at Woodbine. Just to let you know, chocolate chip cookies, pretty close second, okay? I am a fan of chocolate chip cookies, and I wanted to give you chocolate chip cookies, so I thought, well, this is what I could do. I could go get the Keebler or the Nabisco that are in the package and were made 8 months ago, and we can make that point with these cookies, but it says God has given us good things to enjoy. So we went to the bakery at Publix, and we got the fresh-baked chocolate chip cookies. The only problem is we bought all of them, and there weren't enough. So then we went to the bakery at Kroger, and they had more. Come on, you got to pass them out, man. You do not get to eat all those chocolate chip cookies. I mean, look, come up and just pass them down the row. Everybody take a bag, okay? So we went to the bakery at Kroger. Kroger had enough, but we still bought about 2/3 of what they had. And at Kroger, they were in these little boxes. And the little boxes said, made with real butter. I kid you not. So this morning, my wife and my daughter, we started out with 196 cookies. We are not passing out 196 cookies. Because when we were putting them in, we said, maybe we should just test these to see. And my wife pulled one of the cookies out. She's like, there's like white stuff on this cookie. And it turns out that was the butter. I mean, that was, and actually, I need one of those up here. Dave, can you bring one up to me when you got them? So I'm passing out the cookies. Now, you don't get to eat the cookies yet. I'll tell you when. But you're going to get to take them home. Thank you. Oh, okay, here we go. Now, here's what I want to let you know. Everybody's got a bag with cookies. We did this morning. Some of you have one cookie in the bag. Most of you have 2 cookies in the bag. Some people have 3. There's one bag that has like 7. Oh, I have a witness over here. All right. Hey, if you've got one, hold it up. How many people just have one? Okay, we got over there. How many people have 2? All right, how many people have more than 2? I've got 2 right here. This is great. I mean, I want to point something out to you. Until just a few minutes ago, you didn't have any chocolate chip cookies at all. I provided the chocolate chip cookies. and they're good ones. I mean, Church of Woodbine, you're going to get the best chocolate chip cookies because I love you guys. Some of you have one, some have two, some have three, some person has like 7. Should the one with 7 be arrogant and lord it over the person who has 1? Should any of us trust in the chocolate chip cookies? I mean, if you want more chocolate chip cookies, are they going to provide that for you? You're going to eat these. It's going to be great. It'll be great, but they'll be gone. If you want more, you need to look to the provider of the chocolate chip cookies. And if it's the provider of the chocolate chip cookies, I say, you know what? I want you to enjoy these chocolate chip cookies, but with them, I want you to be generous. I want you to be willing to share. As the provider of the chocolate chip cookies, and I give you that instruction, if I give you that command, is it for your good? I think it is. And when God says, I want you to be generous, is that to make us miserable? I don't think so. I think it's for our good. So if you've got your chocolate chip cookies, I just want you symbolically put them in your hand and hold them up. So much better to have and to hold things with an open hand. Okay, you can put your hand down. Told you I was going to give you chocolate chip cookies. I also told you I was going to ask you to give. And this is the part where I'm going to do that. And I'm going to do it in this context. I know that some of you, it's your first time here. I know that we talk about giving in church, and it gets a little bit weird. But I'm going to let you know this is what we're going to do. Every year across all of our Brentwood campuses, we do a Christmas offering. And we pick something that we're going to support, and we give to it, and that's great. This year, I want to take a little bit different approach. Across all of our campuses, each campus has picked its own thing they want to give to, but our goal is to have 100% of our people contribute to the offering. 100%. So if you're here and you were tithing because you grew up Baptist and that's what you did, you were tithing before you could read, and you've been doing that for decades, this offering is for you. There's never a bad time to practice generosity. And if you're here and you've never given in church, and you're just waiting for somebody to challenge or to instruct or to command, good news, this is your day. This offering is especially for you. And for most of us, we're somewhere in the middle of that. We're somewhere in between, like, I've got my arms crossed, or I've been practicing giving all my life. This offering is for you too. So if you're married and your husband is normally the one that gives at church, I want you to actually do it. I want both of you. I want both of you to give. And if you're a kid in this room that's old enough to navigate an online gift form, I want you to give too. And this is what we picked to do at Woodbine because we have a long-standing relationship with Whitsett Elementary. It turns out that at Whitsett, we have found out that some of the kids need coats. They grow every year, those kids. It's weird. So I think maybe in the past we provided other things for them. But this year we're going to provide coats. We figured that a coat costs about $25. So we're going to have up on the screen, you can text the word coats to 623-623. There's also a QR code. We'll put that up at the end of the service. This offering is for everybody. I believe most people in here can give $25. But if you're that person, you're like, I'm food insecure. You said that I'm rich. I still don't believe it. I'm going to have an issue with you, and we're going to talk after the service, and you're mad. I get it. Come talk to me. When you get the form from texting 623-623, there's 4 options. One is for $25. One is for $2.50. And if $25 is a reach for you today, I get it, but here's the thing. We're still, in some level, rich. We are still advantaged. We are still blessed, and I think you can give $2.50. And then there's some of us that we spent more than $25 on the way here on some kind of coffee or donut or something. $25 doesn't even feel generous. I have found out that our online giving platform actually will support larger donations. So if you're the person, $25 doesn't even feel generous, you can give $250. There's even a spot on there for $2,500. And there's a little place to pick your own adventure. You can choose the amount if you want. I want everybody to do it. 100%. 100% is the goal. This campus is special. I know that you are in transition here. I know that the past few weeks have been difficult. I know that you're a big fan of the pastor that just is moving on to God's next assignment. I understand. But I want to tell you from my perspective why I think this campus is special, because maybe you don't get to hear this very often, and maybe you think people don't notice. I told you I came here on my first day. It was so much fun. And I've been to every one of our campuses. I'm in all of them at least a few times a year. It's part of my job. You know what's different about this campus than all the others? I'm just going to tell you. You might not notice it, but I want to celebrate it. When the service is over, you don't leave. Nobody's trampling each other to get their kids and get to the car so they can get to Applebee's or wherever it is that there's going. You don't leave. You are a community, and you're a special one. We've challenged every campus to have 100% participation in their local offering. And I think the campus that has the best possibility of doing it is this one, because of who you are. And if lowering the amount to $2.50 doesn't make it easy enough, I'll go one more. This is how much I believe in you. If you're sitting here and you're saying, man, it is so easy for that guy to ask me to give. He doesn't know my situation. Giving doesn't feel like it's for my benefit. I'm the one that needs to receive. Tell you what, you meet me after the service. I'll be easy to find. I will personally give you the money so that you can give it. God has given us all good things to enjoy. It would be my privilege to invest in your community in this way. The Brentwood team wants amazing things for the churches at Woodbine, and we believe that you can go there. We're entering into a season where God gave us the biggest act of generosity the universe has ever seen. It's the best time to be generous. God's generosity changed the course of history. Your acts of generosity can too, but before they do, they'll change you, because giving is for your good. Thank you for letting me be with you guys today.